Hello guys, welcome to Cruise Control. There's plenty of discussions or rather, arguments regarding Perodua Ativa versus the Proton X50. That's to be expected of course, there are a lot of questions out there. Should you really compare these two models to each other? Are they even in the same class or market? Should you cancel your X50 booking for the Perodua? What is the deal here? The answer is really quite complicated, so let's talk about it. First of all, I do agree that this is not a fair apple to apple comparison. The price range is the most significant factor here. The Perodua is priced between room 62K and room 73K, while the Proton goes for room 79K to over room 100K. There's no overlap here, and crucially the most expensive Ativa is still significantly more affordable than the cheapest X50. So, you might think that these cars have completely different target markets. No one is going to be cross-shopping between the two, so perhaps any comparisons are not relevant at all. But here, I'd have to disagree. Of course you should be comparing the two. Car buyers should always look around, see what's available in the market, not just zero in on one brand and buy it straight away. Yes, there's no overlap, but think about it. If you're a guy who is sitting on a booking of the X50 standard, waiting for your allocation, and now there's a new option in the market. If you get the Ativa AV instead, you can save some money, get better safety features, and yes, probably get the car earlier at this rate. Same goes for those who are looking at the X50 flagship because, you really want your next car to have advanced driver assist systems, ADAS, for example. Now, there's a much cheaper option that meets your criteria. And it goes both ways too. Those considering the Ativa should definitely go out and test drive the X50 too. Now, I haven't driven the new Perodua yet, but I think it's safe to assume the Proton will have a big advantage in terms of performance and of course, ride and handling. Life isn't all about specs and numbers after all. The subjective things sometimes matter so much more. And if, like me, you're hooked on the Proton's looks and driving dynamics, you might want to consider spending that little bit more for the X50. My point is, it's always good to consider all your options, and comparing the two are 100% relevant. Now let's talk about the size difference, because this is pretty significant too. The Ativa is clearly smaller than the X50, and even though it's marketed here as a compact B-segment SUV, in some markets the Daihatsu Rocky is even considered as in a segment SUV. The Proton is a proper B-segment SUV. But at this point, do classes or segments even matter anymore? The Urus is technically a B-segment SUV too, but you wouldn't compare it to these two, right? Looking at dimensions, the X50 is over 300mm longer and 100mm wider than the Ativa. The Proton also has a much longer wheelbase, 75mm longer, to be exact. That's a lot. But as usual, pure numbers don't always tell the whole story. My colleagues who have seen the Daihatsu Rocky all say that it's pretty big inside. I haven't been in one myself, but I would guess that the Perodua SUV will be at least as spacious as the X50 inside. And we already know for a fact the Rocky has a bigger boot than the Proton. It's a similar story if you look at the Perodua Axia and Proton Iris too. The A-segment Axia is obviously smaller than the B-segment Iris, but actually it's the Axia that has a more spacious cabin and a bigger boot. Exterior size can be misleading. So what is my point then? Those of you who are completely dismissing any comparisons just because the X50 is bigger, or the Ativa is a lot smaller, I don't think that's fair. I've seen people saying, oh, the Perodua is too small, so cramped inside. Cannot la. That's just not right. But I get it, though. Size does matter, sometimes. The X50 does look bigger on the road, carrying more road presence and prestige, sure. It looks like the more expensive car, and of course it is. If that matters to you, sure, I can't argue with that. Just remember, always consider all your options. Next, let's move on to engines. Both models have a downsized 3-cylinder turbo engine. So all of you who questioned Proton's use of a 3-pot in the X50, now Perodua has joined the party too. It's not like how the Mercedes-Benz C-Class is a direct rival to the BMW 3 Series, exactly same kind of car, bang on in terms of size, similar pricing, and so on. But that shouldn't stop you from comparing them anyway. Because as I've explained, if you're looking to buy one of these models, you should at least consider the other one too. Having options is never a bad thing. At the same time, as online commenters or industry observers, you should not force your own personal preference on others. Just because you prefer one brand over the other, doesn't mean others must agree with you. Different people have different tastes and preference, guys. Me. Most of you know I have a Proton X50 flagship myself, and having looked at the specs, I think I would have considered the Perodua as an alternative. I'm not saying I would have gotten the Ativa instead. Not likely because I love the way the X50 drives, but I would have at least given the Perodua a chance. Just keep an open mind, people, and be nice to each other. Nobody likes extreme fanboys, so don't be one. If you've made it this far, do let me know what you think of this video, whether you agree or disagree with my views. I'd love to read your comments. Thanks for watching, and stay safe, everyone.